The hidden room under the stairs. The day everything was taken. Thomas Reed had lived in the old house on Maple Ridge Lane for 41 years. Long enough to know the creak of every floorboard. Long enough to recognize the exact way the morning sunlight touched the kitchen window at 7:12 every day. Long enough that the house didn't just feel like a building, it felt alive. Every corner carried a memory. The scratch on the hallway wall from when his son Jake tried riding a bicycle inside the house. The faded stain on the dining table where his wife Sarah had once spilled red wine during a Christmas dinner 20 years ago. The hand-carved staircase his father had built with his own hands. This house had never just been wood and nails. It was history, family, life. And yet, on that cold October morning, Thomas stood in the living room feeling like a stranger inside his own home, because his children had just told him he had to leave. The conversation had started quietly enough. Jake sat on the couch, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Across from him stood his younger sister, Amanda, arms folded tightly across her chest. Both of them looked uncomfortable, but neither looked surprised. Thomas sensed something was wrong the moment they arrived. Children didn't visit together very often anymore, especially not early on a Tuesday morning. "Dad," Jake finally said, clearing his throat, "we need to talk." Thomas set his coffee mug on the table. The smell of fresh coffee still floated through the room. Outside, wind rattled the orange leaves clinging to the maple tree in the front yard. "What's going on?" he asked calmly. Amanda exchanged a glance with Jake. Then she said the words that changed everything. "We sold the house." For a moment, Thomas didn't understand. The sentence felt incomplete, like someone had stopped speaking halfway through a thought. "You sold what?" he asked. "The house," Amanda repeated. Thomas stared at them. Neither of them were smiling. Neither of them were joking. A strange silence filled the room. "You can't sell my house," Thomas said quietly. Jake shifted uncomfortably. "It's not exactly in your name anymore, Dad." The words felt like a punch to the chest. Thomas frowned. "What are you talking about?" Amanda sighed impatiently. 2 years ago, after Mom passed away, remember all those legal papers you signed?" Thomas's mind struggled to catch up. Hospital bills, insurance forms, bank paperwork. There had been so many documents back then. He had trusted his children to help manage everything. "You said those were medical and estate papers," he said slowly. "They were, but they also gave us power of attorney." Thomas felt the room tilt slightly. "And?" Amanda spoke flatly. "And that allowed us to handle the property sale." Thomas blinked. "You sold the house I'm living in." "Yes." The calm way she said it made the words feel even colder. "Why?" Thomas whispered. Amanda walked toward the window and looked outside. "Because you can't live here forever." Thomas stared at her. "I've lived here for 40 years. That's exactly the problem. This place is huge, expensive, and falling apart." Jake added quietly, "We found a really nice retirement community for you." The words felt rehearsed, like they had practiced saying them. Thomas suddenly understood. This conversation had already happened, just not with him. "How long?" he asked. Jake confused. "How long what?" "How long ago did you sell it?" Jake hesitated. "Last month." Thomas felt something heavy settle inside his chest. "You sold my home a month ago, and you're telling me now?" Amanda turned back toward him. "They're giving you a week to move out." The words echoed in the room. A week. 41 years of life reduced to 7 days. Thomas walked slowly toward the hallway. His hand brushed the wooden banister his father had carved decades ago. He could still remember the day it was built. He was 10 years old. His father had let him hold the nails while he worked. "This house will outlive us both," his father had said proudly. Thomas swallowed hard. Apparently not. Behind him, Amanda continued talking. "The buyers are developers." Thomas stopped walking. "Developers?" "Yes," she said. "They plan to build a shopping complex." Thomas slowly turned around. A shopping complex. Jake looked guilty. "The land here is extremely valuable now." Amanda added, "They paid almost $4 million." Thomas felt dizzy. $4 million? That meant they hadn't sold the house. They sold the land his father had bought 60 years ago, the land his family had built their lives on. "And where exactly am I supposed to go?" Thomas asked. Jake quickly replied, "The retirement place we found is great. It has doctors, nurses, activities." "I'm not sick," Thomas interrupted. Amanda crossed her arms. "You're 72, Dad. And you shouldn't be living alone in a house this big." Thomas looked at his children. He barely recognized them. These were the same kids who once built blanket forts in this living room, the same kids who ran down these stairs on Christmas morning. Now they stood there like strangers discussing a business deal. "Did you—" The hidden room under the stairs. The day everything was taken. Thomas Reed had lived in the old house on Maple Ridge Lane for 41 years. Long enough to know the creak of every floorboard. Long enough to recognize the exact way the morning sunlight touched the kitchen window at 7:12 every day. Long enough that the house didn't just feel like a building, it felt alive. Every corner carried a memory. The scratch on the hallway wall from when his son Jake tried riding a bicycle inside the house. The faded stain on the dining table where his wife Sarah had once spilled red wine during a Christmas dinner 20 years ago. The hand-carved staircase his father had built with his own hands. This house had never just been wood and nails. It was history, family, life. And yet, on that cold October morning, Thomas stood in the living room feeling like a stranger inside his own home, because his children had just told him he had to leave. The conversation had started quietly enough. Jake sat on the couch, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Across from him stood his younger sister Amanda, arms folded tightly across her chest. Both of them looked uncomfortable, but neither looked surprised. Thomas sensed something was wrong the moment they arrived. Children didn't visit together very often anymore, especially not early on a Tuesday morning. "Dad," Jake finally said, clearing his throat, "we need to talk." Thomas set his coffee mug on the table. The smell of fresh coffee still floated through the room. Outside, wind rattled the orange leaves clinging to the maple tree in the front yard. "What's going on?" he asked calmly. Amanda exchanged a glance with Jake. Then she said the words that changed everything. "We sold the house." For a moment, Thomas didn't understand. The sentence felt incomplete, like someone had stopped speaking halfway through a thought. "You sold what?" he asked. "The house," Amanda repeated. Thomas stared at them. Neither of them were smiling. Neither of them were joking. A strange silence filled the room. "You can't sell my house," Thomas said quietly. Jake shifted uncomfortably. "It's not exactly in your name anymore, Dad." The words felt like a punch to the chest. Thomas frowned. "What are you talking about?" Amanda sighed impatiently. 2 years ago, after Mom passed away, remember all those legal papers you signed?" Thomas's mind struggled to catch up. Hospital bills, insurance forms, bank paperwork. There had been so many documents back then. He had trusted his children to help manage everything. "You said those were medical and estate papers," he said slowly. They were, but they also gave us power of attorney. Thomas felt the room tilt slightly. And Amanda spoke flatly, and that allowed us to handle the property sale. Thomas blinked. You sold the house I'm living in. Yes. The calm way she said it made the words feel even colder. Why? Thomas whispered. Amanda walked toward the window and looked outside. Because you can't live here forever. Thomas stared at her. I've lived here for 40 years. That's exactly the problem. This place is huge, expensive, and falling apart. Jake added quietly, we found a really nice retirement community for you. The words felt rehearsed, like they had practiced saying them. Thomas suddenly understood. This conversation had already happened, just not with him. How long? He asked. Jake confused. How long what? How long ago did you sell it? Jake hesitated. Last month. Thomas felt something heavy settle inside his chest. You sold my home a month ago, and you're telling me now? Amanda turned back. The loose board. Thomas waited until evening before going downstairs again. The house had grown quiet. Jake and Amanda had left hours earlier, saying they would return in 2 days to help him pack. Help him pack. The words still echoed bitterly in his mind. Outside, the sun had already dipped behind the hills, leaving the house wrapped in a soft gray silence. The wind rattled dry leaves across the driveway. For the first time in 41 years, the house didn't feel peaceful. It felt like something was ending. Thomas walked slowly through the hallway, his hand brushing the wall as he passed the family photographs. There was one of Sarah smiling in the garden, another of Jake holding a fish he had caught when he was 12, Amanda sitting on the kitchen counter, laughing with flour on her face. So many memories. And yet somehow those same children had signed papers selling the home their mother loved. Thomas pushed the thought aside. Instead, he turned toward the staircase. The narrow storage space beneath the stairs had always been easy to ignore. It was nothing more than a small door tucked beside the hallway closet. Most people assumed it was just a storage cupboard, but Thomas remembered something different. His father had spent nearly 2 months building it, and not just building it, perfecting it. Thomas could still remember the sound of hammering late into the night, the smell of fresh-cut wood, and the strange way his father always closed the door quickly whenever Thomas tried to peek inside. At the time, it had felt like a game. Now, standing in front of the small door decades later, it felt like a mystery waiting to be solved. Thomas turned the old brass knob. The door creaked open slowly. Inside was exactly what he expected. Old boxes, a broken vacuum cleaner, a stack of paint cans from years ago. Nothing unusual. He almost laughed at himself. Maybe he had imagined the whole thing. Maybe his father had simply built a well-made storage closet. Thomas sighed and stepped inside. Dust floated through the beam of light from the hallway. He began moving the boxes slowly. Each one contained ordinary things: old winter coats, Christmas decorations, an unused lamp. But something felt strange. The floor beneath his feet sounded different. Not hollow exactly, just different. Thomas bent down and knocked lightly against the wooden boards. Knock. Knock. The first few boards sounded solid. Then one board produced a softer sound. Knock. Thomas froze. He knocked again. Knock. Definitely hollow. His heart began beating faster. Carefully, he pushed the boxes aside and crouched down. The board looked identical to the others. Same color, same nails, same worn edges from decades of use. But when he ran his fingers along the side, he felt something strange. A tiny gap, barely visible, almost like the board had been designed to move. Thomas grabbed a screwdriver from a nearby toolbox. His hands trembled slightly as he slid the tip into the small gap. He pressed gently. For a moment, nothing happened. Then suddenly, click! The board shifted. Thomas stared at it. Slowly, he lifted the wooden panel. Beneath it was darkness, a narrow opening hidden beneath the floor. Thomas felt his breath catch. His father hadn't just built a storage space, he had built something else, a hidden compartment. Carefully, Thomas reached inside and pulled out a small metal handle attached to a wooden ladder. With a quiet creak, the ladder unfolded downward, revealing a small staircase descending beneath the house. Thomas sat back on the floor in shock. A staircase, hidden under the stairs. He stared at the dark opening for a long moment. His father had lived in this house for 30 years before passing away, and somehow, Thomas had never discovered this. A strange mixture of curiosity and nervous excitement filled his chest. Finally, Thomas grabbed a flashlight from the hallway drawer. The beam of light cut through the darkness as he pointed it down the narrow staircase. Dust drifted through the air, but the space below looked larger than he expected. Much larger. Thomas took a deep breath. "Well," he murmured quietly to himself, "let's see what you were hiding, Dad." He stepped onto the first wooden step. The staircase creaked softly beneath his weight. Slowly, carefully, he descended. The air grew cooler as he moved deeper beneath the house. After about 10 steps, the staircase opened into a small underground room. Thomas stopped at the bottom. The flashlight beam swept across the space, and what he saw made his heart pound. It wasn't an empty crawl space. It was a room, a carefully built hidden room. Wooden shelves lined the walls. A heavy metal filing cabinet stood in the corner. There was even a small desk with a lamp attached. Thomas slowly stepped inside. His father hadn't just hidden a compartment. He had built an entire secret office beneath the house, and it looked like it had been used recently. Thomas walked toward the desk. A thick layer of dust covered most surfaces, but the desk itself was surprisingly clean, as if someone had wiped it not long ago. His heartbeat quickened. That didn't make sense. No one knew this room existed. No one except his father. But his father had been gone for 20 years. Thomas opened the desk drawer slowly. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed with age. His breath caught when he saw the handwriting. It was unmistakable, his father's. The words written across the front made Thomas's chest tighten. For Thomas, open only if the house is ever taken from you. Thomas stared at the envelope. A chill moved through him. Slowly, he opened it. Inside was a letter. He unfolded the paper carefully and began to read. "Son, if you are reading this, it means someone has tried to take this house from you. I hoped this day would never come, but I have lived long enough to know that money can change people." Thomas felt a knot form in his throat. He continued reading. "This house is not what it appears, and the land beneath it is far more valuable than anyone realizes. Years ago, I discovered something buried deep beneath this property, something powerful people would pay fortunes to control. That is why I built this room, and why I protected what lies below." Thomas's heart began pounding. Protected what? He turned the page. The final sentence made the blood drain from his face. "Before you leave this house, you must understand the truth. The people who bought this property believe they are buying land, but what they don't know is that something far more valuable is hidden underneath it." Thomas lowered the letter slowly. His mind raced. Suddenly, the $4 million price made sense. The developers hadn't just bought land. They were buying land sitting directly above a water reservoir. Water. In a world where water shortages are becoming more common every year, that was worth far more than land. Thomas turned back to the maps on the wall. Now the markings made sense. The tunnels, the survey points. His father had been studying the underground water system for decades. The letter continued, "And I realized something dangerous. If corporations or developers gained control of this land, they could privately control the water supply. They could sell it, restrict it, profit from it, and the town would never know what was taken from them. Thomas felt a chill move through him. His father had been protecting something for everyone. He kept reading. "That is why I built this room, and why I documented everything. The files in the safe contain proof of the aquifer's location and legal protection rights. If the wrong people ever gain control of this land, those documents must be revealed." Thomas's hands trembled slightly. His father had spent years preparing for exactly this situation. The letter ended with one final line. "Son, if someone has tried to take this house from you, it means they already know what lies beneath it. Be careful. People who want control of water will do anything to get it." Thomas lowered the letter slowly. Suddenly, the events of the last few days looked very different. $4 million for a simple piece of land. Developers showing up before he even moved out. Construction planning immediately. They weren't just building a shopping center. They were securing the land above the water reservoir. And his children had unknowingly handed it to them. A sudden noise above made Thomas freeze. A loud truck engine echoed outside the house. Then another. Thomas quickly climbed back through the tunnel and into the hidden room. When he reached the stairs and stepped into the hallway upstairs, the sound became clearer. Voices. Several voices. Thomas walked to the front window slowly. Outside, 3 black SUVs had pulled into the driveway. Men in suits stepped out. One of them began speaking to a construction worker near the fence. Thomas felt a stomach tighten. This wasn't normal construction planning. These men looked like corporate executives or lawyers. And they were here earlier than expected. Much earlier, as if they were in a hurry. One of the men suddenly turned toward the house. His eyes locked directly onto Thomas through the window. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then the man smiled slightly, and the men who knew too much. Thomas stood motionless beside the window. Outside, the tall man in the dark suit continued walking toward the house. His steps were slow and confident, like someone who already believed he owned the place. Behind him, 2 other men remained near the black SUVs, speaking quietly while watching the property. None of them looked like construction workers. They looked like businessmen, dangerous businessmen. Thomas felt the letter from his father still clutched in his hand. If someone has tried to take this house from you, it means they already know what lies beneath it. Suddenly, everything made sense. The developers weren't just building sewers. They were securing the land above the underground reservoir, and now they had come to make sure their investment stayed secure. The doorbell rang. The sound echoed loudly through the quiet house. Thomas didn't move at first. The bell rang again. Then came 3 firm knocks on the door. Not impatient, not aggressive, just certain. The kind of knock that assumed the door would open. Thomas walked slowly toward the front entrance. For a moment, he glanced down the hallway toward the small door beneath the staircase, the hidden room, the maps, the safe. All of it was still there, hidden, waiting. The knocking came again. Thomas finally opened the door. The man standing on the porch was tall, perhaps in his early 50s. His gray coat looked expensive, and his dark hair was neatly combed despite the wind. He smiled politely. "Mr. Thomas Reed?" Thomas nodded cautiously. "Yes." The man extended his hand. "My name is Daniel Carter. I represent Ridgeway Development Group." Thomas did not shake his hand. "I thought the property already had owners," he said calmly. Carter lowered his hand slowly, still smiling. "Yes, technically the purchase has been completed." "Technically?" Carter's smile widened slightly. "But there are still logistical matters to finalize." Thomas leaned against the doorframe. "I was told I have a week before I leave." Carter tilted his head. "Yes, that was the original agreement." "Original?" For the first time, the man's smile faded slightly. "Our construction schedule has accelerated." Thomas frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," Carter said calmly, We'd prefer you vacate the property sooner. Thomas felt anger rising in his chest. You're asking me to leave my home earlier than agreed? Carter shook his head gently. I'm offering you an opportunity. He reached into his coat and pulled out a thin folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a number written in bold ink. Thomas stared at it. $350,000. Carter spoke softly. That is a relocation bonus. Thomas looked back at him. For what? For leaving today. The words hung in the air. Thomas almost laughed. You want me out of my home today? Carter nodded. With compensation. Thomas slowly handed the paper back. No. Carter didn't look surprised. Most people would consider that a generous offer. Thomas crossed his arms. Most people don't have 41 years of memories inside this house. Carter studied him for a moment. Then he said something strange. Your father built this house, didn't he? Thomas felt a chill move through him. How do you know that? Carter shrugged casually. We research properties thoroughly before purchasing them. But something about the way he said it felt wrong. Too specific, too confident. Thomas watched him carefully. You didn't come here just to offer money. Carter didn't deny it. Instead, he asked quietly, has anything unusual happened in the house recently? Thomas kept his expression neutral. What do you mean? Hidden spaces? Old documents? The words hit him like ice water. His father had been right. They knew, or at least they suspected. Thomas forced a small shrug. It's an old house. Carter stepped slightly closer. If you happen to find anything interesting, anything related to the land beneath the property, his voice softened. My clients would be very interested. Thomas stared at him. You mean the water? For the first time, Carter's expression changed. Only slightly, but enough. A small flash of recognition crossed his eyes. Thomas suddenly understood something important. They didn't know everything, not yet. Carter recovered quickly. Well, I'm not sure what you're referring to. Thomas smiled faintly. I think you do. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Then Carter straightened his coat. Well, he said calmly, our offer stands. He turned and began walking back toward the SUVs. But before stepping off the porch, he stopped. One more thing, Mr. Reed. Thomas waited. Carter looked back at him. Construction crews will begin preliminary ground testing tomorrow. Thomas's stomach tightened. Ground testing? Standard geological surveys. Carter smiled again. After all, we need to know what lies beneath the land. Then he walked away. The SUVs drove off minutes later. The house became quiet again, but the silence felt different now. Heavy. Dangerous. Thomas closed the door slowly. Tomorrow, they would begin drilling into the land. If they discovered the underground reservoir before he revealed the truth, they would control it, completely. He walked quickly back to the hidden door beneath the stairs. Inside the underground room, the large metal safe waited silently. His father had left documents inside it. Proof. Legal protection. Everything needed to stop the developers. Thomas placed his hand on the safe's heavy locking wheel. But there was one problem. He had no idea how to open it. He looked around the room again. The maps, the crates, the desk. Then something caught his eye. Carved into the wooden desk was a small inscription. 4 numbers. 1978. Thomas stared at them. The year his father finished building the house. Slowly, he turned the safe dial. 1, 9, 7, 8. The lock clicked. The heavy door slowly opened. Inside were thick folders, sealed envelopes, and several official documents. Thomas picked up the first file. Across the front were stamped words that made his heart pound. State Water Protection Agreement. His father hadn't just discovered the underground reservoir, he had legally protected it, which meant something incredible. The developers hadn't just bought valuable land, they had bought land they legally couldn't drill into. A a slow smile appeared on Thomas's face. For the first time since his children told him to leave, he felt something different. Hope. Because tomorrow, when those drilling machines arrived, they were about to discover they had made a very expensive mistake, and Thomas finally had the proof to stop them. But upstairs, his phone started ringing. He looked at the screen. It was Jake, and judging by the number of missed calls, his children had just discovered something very serious. The truth revealed. Thomas stared at his phone as Jake's name flashed across the screen again. 10 missed calls, then 11. Something had clearly gone wrong. He answered. "Dad," Jake's voice sounded panicked. "Where are you?" "I'm at home," Thomas said calmly. There was a pause. "Listen, the developers just called us," Jake said nervously. Thomas already knew what was coming. And, Thomas asked quietly, "They're asking questions about the property, about underground surveys and water rights." Thomas walked slowly back into the hidden room beneath the stairs with the documents from the safe held firmly in his hand. "Jake," Thomas said softly, "did you ever ask why they paid $4 million for an old house?" Silence filled the phone. "No," Jake admitted. "Well," Thomas replied, "you're about to find out." The next morning, construction trucks filled the front yard. Large drilling machines stood ready near the fence. Workers prepared equipment, while several black SUVs waited nearby. Daniel Carter stood beside them, watching the house carefully. He looked confident, certain. Thomas stepped outside onto the porch. In his hands was a thick folder of documents. Jake and Amanda arrived minutes later, rushing out of their car with worried faces. "Dad," Amanda said quickly, "you need to talk to them. They're threatening lawsuits." Thomas looked at both of his children calmly. "You sold something that wasn't yours to sell." Jake frowned. "What do you mean?" Before Thomas could answer, Carter walked toward them. "Good morning, Mr. Reed," he said smoothly. "I see you're still here." Thomas held up the folder. "Yes," he replied, "and so is this." Carter's eyes narrowed slightly. "What is that?" Thomas stepped forward and handed him one of the documents. The moment Carter read the first page, his smile disappeared from his face. It was an official state agreement, stamped, signed, legally binding. The title read, "Protected Freshwater Aquifer, State Environmental Protection Zone." Carter flipped through the pages quickly. His expression darkened with every line. "This land," Thomas explained quietly, "sits above one of the largest freshwater reservoirs in the county." Amanda stared at him in disbelief. "Water?" Thomas nodded. "My father discovered it decades ago." Jake looked confused. "Then why didn't anyone